This talk will not go 30 minutes. I want to give you an overview of a provost initiative to enhance research and scholarship project, which is focusing on research IT. As you guys undoubtedly know, there's a number of the things that are in this category. TIPS would be an example, the data sciences initiative that Andreas talked about earlier, and I'll talk about one that we're working on right now as well. So as you undoubtedly know, and I see folks here who are on some of the committees that we've been on in the past, there's a number of different groups at Vanderbilt who cover different segments of computing. So we have people who work with desktop computing needs, we have people who work with educational computing needs and IT needs, we have people who work on administrative needs, and then there's something that until recently has only had a short amount of attention, which is the research IT needs. And that is under the Office of the Vice Provost for Research, Padma Raghavan. Too loud? Okay. I can also not talk so loud. So basically, what we'll be talking about now is something that is in the context of the Office for the Vice Provost of Research. And the idea here is essentially to help improve the research IT needs of Vanderbilt. Now, first of all, what the heck does that mean? Well, as we'll see in a slide or two, there's a number of different needs across campus. Some people have very specialized, very high-end needs. Other people have very general purpose. I won't call them low-end, but low-complexity needs. And so what we're trying to do is come up with a balanced portfolio that can meet a wide range of different needs across the campus. And so we'll continue to roll these things out. We'll talk about more how you can get involved here in a second. This is something that's being done with a number of other people, some of whom are here. Noam is involved, Cliff is involved, other folks here are undoubtedly involved as well. And so we try to have a representation from different parts of the different schools, the different departments, different stakeholders on campus, including folks from ACRE and including folks from VOIT. Now, why is this relevant to data science? Why are we talking now? Because we expect as we move forward with some of these initiatives that the demands for research IT infrastructure and services and support will only increase, and so we want to make sure that folks like you are in a good position to give us your feedback on what your needs are so we can make sure what we're doing will help to satisfy them. Also like to introduce Lindsey Fox. We're very fortunate that she's joined us recently to help out with a lot of the day-to-day heavy lifting up activities here. She'll also be around if you have questions for her when we take breaks and so on. I also, since she handed them to me earlier, we have a copy of the slides if you want the slides, because they have some links in there that may be useful. And we also have something else I'll talk about at the end. So we have some leave-behinds if you'd like to take a look at those. So here's a taxonomy that kind of gives you the big picture view of what our committee is trying to do. So as I mentioned before, there are some needs that are heavily specialized, right? There are people with high-end microscopes that have lots of data flying off them. And there's not a lot of those people, but they have very specific needs about storage and computation. And so that's kind of up at the upper end up here. There's other places where we just need to find a way to catalog all the cool stuff that's going on here at Vanderbilt, all the tools people build, all the methods or services that may be offered. And as you might expect in a place this big, there's a lot of silos, and so people don't always know what's going on. So part of our charge is also to catalog that and make a way to inventory it, make it easier for you to get access to find the right people to work with. So this is kind of the big picture view. I'm going to talk about three things that we're focusing on to begin with, keeping in mind that that's a bigger picture than I'm going to talk about right now. This is the starting point. You guys obviously have a chance to give us feedback and influence the direction for these three things I'll talk about, as well as help set the direction for other things that are going on as well. So one of the first things we're doing is we realize a lot of people on campus need to get programming done. They have a need to be able to develop software or take tools and apply them to analyze data sets or connect to instruments or do various things that involve web surveys or web access, etc. And some places are well set up to do that organically. There's institutes that have professional programming staff. I work for the Institute for Software Integrated Systems, formerly known as ISIS. We don't use that as much anymore, but that's the acronym. Don't ask me why. Don't ask me why it's still the acronym. That's the real question. And so we have 30 or 40 people who are full-time programmers. Obviously, not everybody's trying to do something like that. And so what we're trying to do is come up with sort of a liquid workforce model where we can do several things. One thing we could do is find groups on campus that have spare capacity, maybe a person who is currently a full FTE, but there isn't full FTE amount of work for them to do. So we could find a way to sort of lease them out to other people who have a need for a half an FTE or a quarter of an FTE for a certain period of time. So part of the goal is to figure out where those resources are and how we can serve as kind of a clearinghouse to get people connected together. That's one perspective. Another perspective, as those of you who've tried to do this, it's often very hard to go out, even if you have grant money, and hire someone to do some programming for you for 6 months to 12 months. It probably takes 8 to 15 months to get the contract set up, because things are rather glacial in our contracting process sometimes. So what we're also trying to do is come up with a way to pre-vet these people so that when you have a need, you can come somewhere, and that somewhere is still being determined, and you can find a way to get access to those resources that may be around campus, may actually be beyond campus, maybe beyond Nashville, and do it in a way that's a lot less frictional as it is now, right? Frictionless access to resources. Not surprisingly, as we move ahead with the data sciences initiative, if all goes according to plan, that may also be a great place to find people with skills that are of interest to this community. So we hope to have, if we get it all according to plan, we hope to have a stable of research scientists, research staff who could do some of this work depending on their availability and opportunities for different kinds of funding. So this is one of the things we're working on. Obviously, we solicit your feedback. If you have capacity, please let us know. If you need capacity, please let us know. We're working on a couple of pilot projects right now with some folks at Peabody just to try to see how this is going to work. And we think it's pretty promising. Another thing we're going to do here as well is try to connect some of the really good undergrads who are looking for projects to work on, especially things that involve, sort of web development, where undergrads love to do that kind of stuff. It's great for resume building. And so we think a lot of low-hanging fruit can probably be addressed with some kind of liquid workforce model involving undergrads. The medical center does a lot of this stuff, by the way, and it works well. The next issue, and this again is a different point in that space. This is more for people with either big data, big storage needs, or the need for lots of computational cycles. And of course, as you know, we have Acre, which is one way of doing this. But as we talked about recently, there's other ways these days to get access to elastic computing and storage resources. So there's Amazon AWS, there's Google Cloud, there's Microsoft Azure, there's other stuff around. And so we're looking at different models, making it easier for people at Vanderbilt to get access to the right kind of capability based on what it is you're trying to do. So maybe Acre is your cup of tea. And obviously we have a big investment there, and we continue to grow that and sustain it. But there's other places to go as well. And so we're working with people both on the research side and the education side to make it easier to access those cloud-based resources. Some of you here who teach classes may be interested to know that Vanderbilt is finally a member of the AWS Educate program, which gives us much more access to AWS at free cost or no cost for up to, I think it's a couple hundred hours per student per their time at Vanderbilt. So if you're interested in that, let me know, and I'll put you in contact with the folks at VOIT, a guy named Ed Wisdom, who is running that program. And so it's a great way to get computation in the classroom. We're also working something similar to have computation for researchers in a similar kind of way, where it's either very inexpensive or perhaps free up to a certain amount of utilization of gigabits and bytes and cycles and so on. So keep us in mind if you have big data computing needs and you want to try some elastic resources from the cloud. The final thing I'll talk about now, and this is again sort of a call for involvement, it doesn't help us to have all these great resources around campus and not be able to tap into them because we don't know where they are and we have no way of getting people connected. So another one of our goals is to basically do an inventory and eventually build a web portal that'll make it easy to go in sort of a one-stop shopping type of way to find out who's here, what are they doing, how can you get connected. Some of these things are cores, some of these things could be cores, some of these things are just capabilities that you should be aware of. And of course, one of the big themes here at Vanderbilt, one of our strengths is trans-institutional collaboration. That's what, in some sense, sets us apart from other places that are maybe bigger than us, but are also heavily siloed. So this is something else that's coming to fruition, and Lindsey knows more about the time frame for that, but I would say in the next couple of weeks/months, we'll have that portal stood up, and then you can get involved there. So what do we need from you? As I mentioned before, we've got the data science initiative, we've got the tips, there's other things that are part of the Provost Initiative for Enhancing Research and Scholarship. The Research IT Working Group is another thing. What we would love from you folks in the not-too-distant future is to get input from faculty, from students, from staff, from whomever. And I'll give you a link in a second for how you can provide that. We're also planning on having some town hall meetings, not unlike the ones that we had for the data sciences working groups we've done where we want people to come together. We're also very likely to do a little of outreach before the town halls or in concert with the town halls, where we would actually like to come and meet with people in their schools, in their departments, in a more targeted way to find out specifically what your needs are. So don't be surprised if we hit some of you up in the not-too-distant future to either we'll come to you or you can come to us. We'll talk about what you would like, what would make most effective sense. And obviously, there'll be a huge synergy between that and the data sciences initiative if/when it gets off the ground, because we see there being a lot of overlap. So my last get off the stage slide, this is the link where you could go if you have time. I know nobody likes to be surveyed to death, but this is one of the handouts we have here which has that link if you'd like to pick that up. We would like to hear sort of what your needs are. We will also, again, have town halls. We'll come meet with you to find out in a more definitive way, in a more face-to-face way. But this is a good sense for us to know what is the demand, what's the need. Why should you care about that? Because obviously in an institution where people are making arguments for pots of money that should come their way, the more we can demonstrate demand from faculty, the more we can show what we're doing makes a difference, the easier it is to get the resources to do the work that needs to be done. So please help us in that. And again, there's some other links here you can find out about the Peers Initiative and the Research IT Working Group. Any questions about this? Yes, sir?
The AWS you mentioned, is there any kind of institutional agreement on like confidential data or issues around that?
Yeah, that's a great question. Well, as anybody who's been paying attention to the news the last week or two knows, the second something goes into the cloud, especially when it's commercially owned cloud, who the heck knows where that data goes and who gets access to it? A big issue. So I'm sure that there's all kinds of terms of service and service level agreements. How much I would put really, really confidential stuff there all depends on how lucky you feel, right? In a Clint Eastwood sort of way. So I mean, let's be honest. The second you do anything that goes into any electronic media, somebody is probably listening to it, right? So as my counterpart, Eric Schmidt, my doppelganger, the guy who used to be the CEO of Google, said, if you don't want people to know the bad things you're doing, do not do them over the internet, right? Because they'll find out. So people will tell you it's good. Honestly, it's a problem anywhere. So whether you put it in AWS, whether you put it in Box, whether you put it on your computer, someone who wants it will probably get it. So I don't think it's any worse, but we're making no guarantees for that. I certainly would not recommend doing things like putting FERPA or HIPAA-related stuff there. There's other processes for dealing with that. Yeah?
A couple of questions, one big, one small. Big is, as you're looking at this being a trans-institutional thing and our budgeting is moving from one Vanderbilt to ETOB, how do you think about dealing with those issues? And then let me ask my small question, then you can ask.
Yeah.
Is one aspect of kind of people who are dealing with kind of doing data science on our, kind of with our own hardware is we run into a lot of bureaucratic things around spending our money effectively on what hardware we think is the right for our project, and are you looking to address those questions?
Yeah, absolutely. So let's start with the easy question, the second question first, right? So I think the idea here is to, where it makes sense, help people to do things that synergize, right? So if we can do deals where we can pool together stuff, this is kind of the desktop IT model. If you can fit within 2 or 3 brands of something, we can probably get a special deal with Dell or HP to get a better price and better service. But we also know, especially the second you get out of administrative computing or desktop computing or educational computing, the minute you get into research stuff, you may have very special instruments, you may have very special needs. So we'd like to know what those are, if possible, so we can try to help. And we're also trying to figure out ways to connect with people who have more expertise than some of our expertise organically. But we know it's not going to be a Procrustean one-size-fits-all solution. So if you're running into those things, let us know, Padma or me or someone know, and we'll try to help you where we can, knowing that it is a bureaucracy. And sadly, there's sort of a one-size-fits-all philosophy for a lot of the computing needs, but we've made it very clear, especially in research IT, that that's not the model we want. Sometimes it may be the most expedient way to do it, but it's not always the best way to do it. The bigger question you ask is, how do you do centralized collaborative activities in an ETOB world? The key thing there, I mean, again, that's a bit above my pay grade, but I'll take a shot at it because I work a lot with the people who wrestle with this, like the deans. The key thing is to try to figure out stakeholders who have aligned incentives to align. And sometimes those work well, sometimes they don't. I think what will happen is we're going to be looking for sources of funding, much like the data sciences initiative, that will cut across the tubs, if you will, and then try to find ways to get people to work together in that model. And that will require a different governance approach. And that's sort of what the Office of the Vice Provost for Research is trying to do, is coming up with ways to have Office of Vice Provost research level institutes that are intentionally designed to be a little bit separate from the stovepipes. We will find out exactly how that works as we put together the data sciences initiative, because that's a great example of something that's like that. So I would say work in progress. Yes, ma'am. We're meeting next week with some folks to try to see if we can use some organic resources here at Vanderbilt to kickstart this thing. Please send me and/or Lindsey Fox email. Lindsey, you can, or take the survey. Yes, that's even better. So yes, we would love to know that we already have people lined up who, there's a lot of demand for this. We're trying to figure out a way to make the supply as painless as possible. So yes, starting right now, let us know. We're happy to help.